What I'm about to share with you are 6 of the most disturbing true crime cases that involve Snapchat. These aren't urban legends or made-up stories. These are real cases where the app became a tool for predators. Before we start, I need to warn you that these stories contain graphic descriptions of violence, murder, and abduction. If that's not something you can handle, stop watching now. For everyone else, let's dive into these Snapchat horror stories. Our first story takes us to Sayreville, New Jersey in 2017, and involves the murder of 15-year-old Madison "Maddie" Hotcheny. Maddie was a high school student at Sayreville War Memorial High School. She was a cheerleader, had a close group of friends, and seemed like a typical teenage girl. She was active on social media, like most teenagers her age. She had Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook, and used them to stay connected with friends and classmates. Her parents, Jennifer and Michael Hotcheny, thought they were careful about monitoring Maddie's online activity. They knew her passwords. They'd had conversations about not talking to strangers online. They thought they were protecting their daughter. But in September 2017, Maddie started talking to someone new on Snapchat. His username was something generic that Maddie's friends didn't recognize when they saw it pop up on her phone. When her best friend asked who she was talking to, Maddie said it was a boy from a neighboring town who'd added her after seeing her at a football game. This seemed totally plausible to her friend. Teenagers meet at sporting events all the time. Social media connections after meeting someone in person is normal. Maddie's friend didn't think anything of it and didn't press for more details. The boy said his name was Tyler. He told Maddie he was 17 years old, a junior at a different high school about 30 minutes away. He sent Maddie photos that showed a good-looking teenage boy with dark hair and a nice smile. In the photos, Tyler was wearing a Letterman jacket, hanging out with friends, doing normal teenage things. Everything about him seemed legitimate. There was nothing in his profile or the photos he sent that raised any red flags for Maddie or for her friends who occasionally saw the messages pop up on her phone. Tyler and Maddie talked every day for several weeks. Their conversations were typical teenage flirting. Tyler would send Maddie funny memes and TikTok videos. He'd compliment her, telling her she was pretty, that he liked her smile. He'd ask her about her day, about cheerleading practice, about school. He seemed genuinely interested in her life. Maddie was excited about this new connection. She thought she'd met a cute boy who liked her. After a few weeks of talking, Tyler asked Maddie if she wanted to meet in person. He said he'd love to actually hang out with her instead of just messaging. He suggested they meet at a park called Johnson Park that was about halfway between their two towns. It was a public place, lots of people around during the day, seemed safe. Maddie thought about it and decided yes, she wanted to meet Tyler. She was nervous but excited. She told her best friend about the plan, but asked her not to tell anyone else because Maddie wanted to see if there was a real connection before making it public knowledge. Her friend agreed to keep the secret. On Tuesday, November 14th, 2017, Maddie told her parents she was going to the library after school to study with friends for an upcoming test. Her parents didn't question this. Maddie was a good student. Going to the library to study was normal for her. They told her to be home by dinner time and to text them when she was heading back. Maddie said she would. Instead of going to the library, Maddie took a New Jersey transit bus to Johnson Park. She was texting her best friend updates as she went. Just got on the bus. So nervous, LOL. Almost there, I can see the park. Her friend was texting back encouraging messages. You got this. He's gonna think you're so pretty. Text me after and tell me everything. Maddie got off the bus at the stop near Johnson Park around 4:15 in the afternoon. It was starting to get dark, but there were still people around. Joggers, people walking dogs, families at the playground. Maddie walked into the park looking for Tyler. She sent him a Snapchat saying, "I'm here, where are you?" He responded quickly. "I'm at the parking lot near the back entrance. See the dark blue car?" Maddie walked toward the back of the park. The parking lot he was talking about was more secluded, fewer people around. She saw a dark blue sedan and a man standing next to it waving at her. Except the man wasn't a 17-year-old boy. He was clearly much older, in his 40s, balding, heavy set. Maddie stopped walking. She felt confused and scared. This wasn't Tyler. This couldn't be Tyler. The man started walking toward her quickly. Maddie turned to run, but he grabbed her. He was strong. He forced her toward the car. Maddie screamed, but they were far enough from the main park area that no one heard, or if they did, they didn't react. The man shoved Maddie into his car and drove out of the parking lot. This was the last time Maddie's friend heard from her. She texted Maddie at 5 p.m. asking, "So how did it go?" No response. She texted again at 6. "Maddie, hello? Don't leave me hanging." Still nothing. By 7 p.m., Maddie's friend was getting worried. She called Maddie's phone. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Same thing. When Maddie didn't come home by dinner time at 6:30, her parents started calling her. Her phone was off. They called her friends asking if anyone had seen her. Nobody had. That's when Maddie's best friend realized she needed to tell the truth. She called Mrs. Hachney back and said Maddie went to meet someone she'd been talking to on Snapchat. A boy named Tyler. They were meeting at Johnson Park. Jennifer and Michael Hachney immediately panicked. They jumped in their car and drove to Johnson Park. It was now almost 7:30 and fully dark. The park was closed. They drove around the perimeter looking for any sign of Maddie. Nothing. They called 911 and reported their daughter missing. Police responded quickly. Given that Maddie was 15 and had gone to meet a stranger from the internet, they took this seriously. Officers went to Johnson Park to search. They found Maddie's phone on the ground in the back parking lot. The screen was cracked like it had been dropped or thrown. This was a bad sign. Police immediately started an investigation. They contacted Snapchat to get information about the Tyler account that Maddie had been talking to. The next morning, Wednesday, November 15th, 2017, at around 7 a.m., a jogger running on a trail near Johnson Park found Maddie's body in a wooded area about half a mile from the park. She was partially hidden under some leaves and branches. The jogger called 911 immediately. Police arrived and confirmed it was Maddie. She was fully clothed, but her clothes were disheveled. There were visible bruises and marks on her neck. The medical examiner, who arrived at the scene, did a preliminary examination and determined Maddie had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death. Based on the condition of her body and the ambient temperature, the ME estimated she'd been dead for approximately 12 to 14 hours, which meant she was killed sometime between 5 and 7 p.m. the previous evening, shortly after she'd arrived at the park. The news hit Maddie's parents like a freight train. Their daughter was dead. She'd been murdered. The girl who'd been excited about cheerleading practice just 2 days ago, who'd been picking out her prom dress, who'd been planning her future, was gone. Jennifer Hachney collapsed when detectives told her. Michael had to be physically held up by officers. Their worst nightmare had come true. The investigation moved quickly. Police had Maddie's phone, which had been found at the scene. Even though the phone was locked, digital forensics experts were able to extract data from it. They found all the messages between Maddie and Tyler. They found the photos Tyler had sent. They started tracing the account. The Tyler account had been created 3 months earlier, in August 2017. It was registered with a burner phone number, one of those prepaid phones you can buy at any convenience store. The number was no longer active. It had been used just to create the account and then ditched. The photos Tyler had sent to Maddie were not original. Police used reverse image search and found that the photos were stolen from a real teenage boy's Instagram account. The real boy in the photos was named Tyler Simmons, and he lived in Ohio. He had no connection to the case whatsoever. He was just some random teenager whose pictures had been stolen and used by a predator to catfish Maddie. Tyler Simmons was contacted by police, and he was shocked and horrified to learn his photos had been used this way. Snapchat cooperated with the investigation. They provided police with all the data they had on the Tyler account. This included IP addresses used to access the account. Most of the IP addresses were from public Wi-Fi hotspots, places like Starbucks, McDonald's, the public library. These were locations where anyone could log on anonymously without being traced. But there was one IP address that was different. One time, about 2 weeks earlier, the Tyler account had been accessed from a residential IP address. Police traced that IP address to a house in East Brunswick, New Jersey, about 25 miles from Sayreville. The house belonged to a 42-year-old man named Robert Michael Jennings. Robert was married to a woman named Linda Jennings, and they had 2 children together, a son who was 14 and a daughter who was 12. Robert worked as an IT consultant for various companies, which meant he had the technical knowledge and skills to do things like create fake online accounts, use VPNs to mask his location, and cover his digital tracks. He was smart about technology. On Thursday, November 16th, detectives from the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office showed up at Robert Jennings's door with questions about Maddie's disappearance and murder. Robert answered the door and seemed surprised to see police there. When asked if he knew Madison Hatcheney, Robert said no, he'd never heard that name. When asked if he knew anything about a Snapchat account under the name Tyler, Robert said no, he didn't use Snapchat, that was for kids. He said he had no idea what they were talking about. But detectives noticed Robert seemed nervous. He was sweating even though it was a cool November day. His hands were shaking slightly. His answers came too quickly, too rehearsed. Based on the IP address evidence linking Robert to the Tyler account, detectives obtained a search warrant for Robert's home and all his electronic devices. They executed the warrant that same afternoon. Robert's wife and children were home. Linda was confused and terrified. She kept asking what was happening, why police were searching their house. The children were scared. Officers seized Robert's personal laptop, his work laptop, his phone, and his iPad. They also searched his car, the dark blue Honda Accord, registered in his name. In the trunk of the car, hidden under the spare tire, they found Maddie's phone. This was the major piece of physical evidence linking Robert directly to Maddie. Robert was arrested on the spot and taken to the police station for questioning. At first, he maintained his innocence. He said he didn't know Maddie, had never talked to her, had no idea how her phone ended up in his car. He suggested someone must have planted it there, but detectives weren't buying it. They told Robert they had evidence connecting him to the Tyler account. They told him they had his computer and would find everything. Robert asked for a lawyer, and the interrogation stopped. Over the next few days, digital forensics experts worked on Robert's computers. He'd been smart about covering his tracks. He'd used software to wipe data, had used VPNs and private browsing, had tried to delete his search history. But he wasn't as smart as he thought. Forensic software was able to recover deleted files and internet activity. They found everything. On Robert's personal laptop, hidden in encrypted folders, were thousands of messages between him and Maddie. The Snapchat messages, even though they'd disappeared from the app, were logged in the computer's system files. Investigators could see the entire conversation between Tyler and Maddie from the first day they connected to the day of her murder. They found the photos Robert had sent Maddie, the ones he'd stolen from the real Tyler's Instagram. They found searches Robert had done for Johnson Park, including Google Maps screenshots showing the layout of the park and the back parking lot where Maddie's phone was found. But it got worse. Robert hadn't just been talking to Maddie. They found evidence he'd been catfishing dozens of teenage girls over the past 3 years. He had multiple fake accounts on Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. He'd been pretending to be teenage boys, talking to girls aged 13 to 17, building relationships, trying to convince them to meet him in person. Most of the girls had refused or had stopped talking to him when he pushed too hard to meet. Some had figured out something was off and blocked him. But Maddie had agreed to meet, and she'd paid for it with her life. Investigators also found searches on Robert's computer for things like how to strangle someone quickly, and how long does DNA evidence last, and how to clean a crime scene. These searches had been done in the weeks before Maddie's murder. This showed premeditation. Robert had been planning to kill whoever agreed to meet him. With all this evidence, prosecutors felt confident they had a strong case. On November 20th, 2017, 6 days after Maddie's murder, Robert Jennings was formally charged with first-degree murder, felony murder, kidnapping, aggravated sexual assault, and possession of child pornography. The child pornography charges came from other images found on his computer during the forensic search. Robert's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal, but Robert refused. He insisted he was innocent, that the evidence was planted, that he was being framed. His wife, Linda, filed for divorce immediately after his arrest. She released a statement saying she had no knowledge of Robert's activities, that she was horrified by what he'd done, and that her heart broke for the Hatchny family. She said she'd seen no signs that Robert was doing anything wrong. He'd seemed like a normal husband and father. The trial took place in September 2018, almost a year after Maddie's death. The prosecution presented all the digital evidence. They showed the jury the messages between Robert and Maddie where he'd pretended to be Tyler. They showed the stolen photos. They showed the search history. They presented testimony from the medical examiner about Maddie's cause of death. They presented DNA evidence that showed Robert's DNA was found under Maddie's fingernails, suggesting she'd fought back and scratched him during the attack. They presented phone records showing Robert's phone had pinged off cell towers near Johnson Park at the time Maddie was there. The defense tried to argue that the digital evidence was unreliable, that Robert's computer had been hacked, that someone else could have used his internet connection to create the Tyler account. They tried to create reasonable doubt, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury didn't buy the defense's arguments. During the trial, prosecutors showed that after creating the Tyler account and starting conversations with multiple girls, Robert had specifically focused on Maddie because she seemed the most trusting and the most likely to agree to meet him. He'd spent weeks building rapport with her, making her feel comfortable, earning her trust. All of this was calculated. He'd chosen Johnson Park because he knew the layout, knew there was a secluded back parking lot, knew it would be easy to grab someone there without being seen. He'd planned everything meticulously. On September 28th, 2018, after deliberating for just under 5 hours, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on all counts. Robert showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He just sat there, staring straight ahead. Behind him in the courtroom, Jennifer and Michael Hatchny were crying, holding each other. It was a relief to have the verdict, to know Maddie's killer would be held accountable. But it didn't bring their daughter back. At the sentencing hearing 2 months later, Jennifer and Michael gave victim impact statements. Jennifer told the court about Maddie's life, about her dreams, about the future she'd never have. She talked about the hole in their family that could never be filled. Michael spoke directly to Robert, telling him he'd taken everything from them, that he was a monster who'd preyed on their daughter's innocence. Robert was given an opportunity to speak, but declined. He had nothing to say. The judge sentenced Robert Jennings to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder charge, plus additional consecutive sentences for the other charges, totaling over 200 years. Robert was 43 years old. He would die in prison. The judge said in his remarks that Robert was a predator who'd used technology to hunt vulnerable young victims, that he'd shown no remorse, and that he represented a continued danger to society. Robert was sent to East Jersey State Prison, a maximum security facility. He's been there since late 2018. He's in protective custody because inmates, who've harmed children are targeted by other prisoners. He'll spend the rest of his life in a cell. Now, if you're finding this content compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Let's move on to our second story. This next case takes us to Lansing, Michigan, in April 2019, and involves a kidnapping that was documented in real time on Snapchat. The victim was 19-year-old Kelsey Morrison. Kelsey was in her sophomore year at Michigan State University studying nursing. She lived in an off-campus apartment on Abbott Road with 2 roommates. Kelsey was a good student, responsible, close with her family back in Grand Rapids. She worked part-time at a Panera Bread near campus and seemed to be thriving in college life. In the spring semester of 2019, Kelsey was single and decided to try online dating. She downloaded Bumble, one of the popular dating apps. She set up a profile with some photos and a bio describing herself. Within a few days, she matched with a guy who seemed interesting. His profile said his name was Brandon. He was 23 years old, he worked in construction, and he lived in Lansing. His profile photos showed an attractive guy with a muscular build, wearing a baseball cap in some photos, dressed nicely in others. He had a warm smile. His bio said he liked working out, watching sports, and trying new restaurants. Kelsey and Brandon started chatting through the Bumble app. Their conversations were flirty and fun. Brandon seemed charming and funny. He sent Kelsey messages that made her laugh. After a few days of talking on Bumble, Brandon suggested they move their conversation to Snapchat. He said he didn't like the Bumble interface and preferred Snapchat for messaging. Kelsey thought this made sense. Snapchat was more casual, and a lot of people her age preferred it. She gave him her Snapchat username. They started snapping back and forth. Brandon would send Kelsey photos throughout his day. Pictures of him at work sites with construction equipment. Pictures of his meals. Selfies with his dog. A golden retriever named Max. Videos of him at the gym working out. Everything seemed normal and genuine. Kelsey sent him snaps too. Photos of her at work, pictures of her food, selfies with her roommates. They were getting to know each other. After about 2 weeks of constant communication, Brandon asked Kelsey if she wanted to go on a real date. He suggested dinner at a restaurant called Cask and Coas, which was near MSU campus. Kelsey was excited. Brandon seemed great, and she was ready to meet him in person. They made plans for Thursday, April 18th, 2019, at 7 p.m. Kelsey told her roommates about the date. She showed them Brandon's Snapchat and some of the messages they'd been exchanging. Her roommates looked through his profile and agreed he seemed nice. They told Kelsey to have fun, but to text them if she needed anything. Standard college girl safety protocol. On the day of the date, Kelsey spent extra time getting ready. She curled her hair, did her makeup carefully, picked out a cute outfit. She was nervous, but excited. Around 6:30 p.m., she took a selfie in her mirror and posted it to her Snapchat story with the caption, "Date night." Several of her friends saw the post and sent her messages. "Have fun. You look gorgeous. Tell us how it goes." At 6:45 p.m., Kelsey got a Snapchat message from Brandon. "Hey beautiful, I'm outside your building, ready when you are." Kelsey grabbed her purse, checked her reflection one more time, and headed downstairs. She walked out of her apartment building and looked around for Brandon. She saw a dark-colored SUV parked at the curb and a man in the driver's seat waving at her. She walked over to the car and got in the passenger seat. The man behind the wheel was not the guy from the Snapchat photos. He looked older, maybe late 20s, with a shaved head and a goatee. He wasn't smiling. Kelsey immediately felt uneasy. "Are you Brandon?" she asked. "Yeah, let's go," the man said, and started driving before Kelsey even had her seatbelt on. "Wait, you don't look like your pictures," Kelsey said. Her heart was starting to pound. "Old photos," the man said gruffly. "Where are we going?" "Cask & Co. is the other direction," Kelsey said, looking out the window and recognizing they were heading away from campus. The man didn't respond. He just kept driving. Kelsey pulled out her phone from her purse. "What are you doing?" the man asked, glancing at her. "I'm just texting my roommate," Kelsey said, her hands shaking. The man reached over and tried to grab her phone, but Kelsey pulled it away. "Give me your phone," he demanded. "No," Kelsey said. She quickly opened Snapchat and started recording a video. Her hand was shaking, so the video was very shaky and dark, but she managed to capture about 5 seconds. In the video, you can hear her saying, "Please, I don't understand what's happening. Where are you taking me?" Her voice was filled with fear. She quickly posted the video to her Snapchat story before the man could grab her phone. Then he snatched it out of her hand. The man, whose real name was Darius Matthews, drove Kelsey to his house on the south side of Lansing. It was a run-down single-story house on a quiet street. He pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. "Get out," he ordered. Kelsey started crying. "Please, I just want to go home. Please let me go." Darius grabbed her arm roughly and pulled her out of the car. He dragged her toward the house. Kelsey tried to scream, but Darius put his hand over her mouth. He unlocked his front door and shoved Kelsey inside. The inside of the house was messy and dark. It smelled like old food and sweat. Darius pushed Kelsey through the living room toward a door that led to the basement. Kelsey was terrified. She tried to fight back, but Darius was much stronger. He forced her down the basement stairs. The basement was unfinished, with concrete walls and a cement floor. There was a chair in the middle of the room. Darius pushed Kelsey into the chair and used zip ties to bind her wrists to the armrests. Then he zip-tied her ankles to the chair legs. Kelsey was sobbing, begging him to let her go. Darius just looked at her and then went back upstairs, closing the door and leaving her alone in the dark basement. Meanwhile, back at Kelsey's apartment, one of her roommates named Sarah was scrolling through Snapchat stories around 7:30 p.m. She saw Kelsey's date night post from earlier. Then she saw the new video Kelsey had posted. Sarah watched it once, confused. She watched it again. Something was very wrong. She could hear the fear in Kelsey's voice. Sarah immediately called Kelsey's phone. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Still voicemail. Sarah ran to her other roommate, Jenna's room. "Something's wrong with Kelsey. Look at this." She showed Jenna the video. Jenna's eyes went wide. "Oh my God, we need to call the police right now." Sarah called 911 at 7:35 p.m. She told the dispatcher that her roommate had gone on a date with someone from a dating app and had posted a video to Snapchat that showed she was in distress. The dispatcher asked for details. Sarah explained about Brandon, about the date plans, about the video. The dispatcher said they'd send officers to their apartment immediately to take a report. While Sarah and Jenna were on the phone with 911, another video appeared on Kelsey's Snapchat story. This one was even more disturbing. It showed Kelsey sitting in a chair in what looked like a basement. The video was short, maybe 3 seconds, but you could clearly see that her hands appeared to be tied or restrained. She was crying. The video cut off abruptly. More of Kelsey's friends started seeing these videos on her story. Several of them called 911 to report what they were seeing. Multiple reports came in within minutes, all saying the same thing. Kelsey Morrison from MSU appeared to be in danger based on videos on her Snapchat. Lansing Police Department responded immediately. Officers arrived at Kelsey's apartment within 10 minutes. They interviewed Sarah and Jenna, looked at the Snapchat videos, got all the information about Brandon. Sarah showed them the Bumble profile where Kelsey had matched with him. She showed them the Snapchat username Kelsey had been talking to. Officers immediately contacted Snapchat's law enforcement response team and requested emergency information disclosure. This is a process where law enforcement can get user data from social media companies in emergency situations where someone's life is in danger. Snapchat responded within the hour, which was incredibly fast. They provided all the data associated with the Brandon account. This included the phone number used to register the account, the IP address used to access it, and location data. The phone number was not a burner. It was a real number registered to a 27-year-old man named Darius Matthews, who lived at 1847 Rosedale Avenue in Lansing. This was a major break. Police now had a name and address. Officers immediately ran Darius Matthews through their system. He had a criminal record. He'd been arrested twice before, once for felony assault in 2015 and once for drug possession in 2017. He'd served time for the assault charge and was currently on probation. This guy was bad news. Police got Darius's address from his probation records and from the phone registration. They also got vehicle registration information. Darius owned a dark gray Chevy Tahoe, which matched what witnesses had seen Kelsey getting into. By 8:45 p.m., about 2 hours after Kelsey got into Darius's car, a tactical unit from Lansing PD was surrounding his house at 1847 Rosedale Avenue. They could see the Tahoe parked in the driveway. Lights were on inside the house. Officers set up a perimeter and called Darius's phone using a police line. The phone rang, but no one answered. They called again. Still no answer. The incident commander made the decision to breach the door. They had probable cause that a kidnapping victim was inside, and that time was of the essence. At 9 p.m., officers used a battering ram to break down Darius's front door. They entered with guns drawn, shouting, "Police, search warrant!" They cleared the first floor room by room. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. No sign of Kelsey or Darius. Then they found the basement door. It was locked from the outside. An officer kicked it open and they went down the stairs. There was Kelsey, still tied to the chair, terrified, but alive. "Help me, please help me," she sobbed. Officers immediately began cutting the zip ties off her wrists and ankles. While some officers were freeing Kelsey, others continued searching the house. They found Darius upstairs in a small second bedroom, trying to climb out a window. Officers grabbed him and pulled him back inside. He tried to fight but was quickly subdued and handcuffed. "You're under arrest for kidnapping," an officer told him. Darius didn't say anything, just glared at them. Kelsey was brought upstairs and outside to a waiting ambulance. Paramedics checked her over. She had some bruising on her wrists and ankles from the zip ties. She was dehydrated and in shock, but physically she was okay. She'd been held for about 2.5 hours. If her friends hadn't seen the Snapchat videos and called police immediately, who knows what would have happened. Kelsey was taken to Sparrow Hospital for a full medical examination and treatment. Darius Matthews was taken to the Lansing Police Department for booking and questioning. In his initial interview, he claimed everything was consensual, that Kelsey had come to his house willingly. But detectives weren't buying it. They had the Snapchat videos that clearly showed Kelsey in distress, asking where she was being taken, tied to a chair. They had witness statements from Kelsey's roommates. They had Kelsey's own statement describing how Darius had refused to take her to the restaurant, had driven her to his house against her will, had tied her up. Detectives also found evidence in Darius's house that suggested he'd been planning to sexually assault Kelsey. In the basement, near where she'd been tied up, they found rope, more zip ties, duct tape, and a box of condoms. In his bedroom, they found a camera set up on a tripod pointed at the bed. It appeared Darius had been planning to film whatever he was going to do to Kelsey. Further investigation revealed that the Brandon profile on Bumble and Snapchat was completely fake. The photos were stolen from a fitness influencer's Instagram account. The real guy in the photos was named Brandon Walsh, and he lived in California. He had no idea his photos had been stolen and used to catfish women. Darius had created the fake profile specifically to lure women. When detectives went through Darius's phone, they found he'd been talking to at least a dozen different women on various dating apps, all using fake profiles with stolen photos. Kelsey wasn't his first target. She was just the first one who'd actually agreed to meet him. Darius Matthews was charged with kidnapping in the first degree, attempted criminal sexual conduct, unlawful imprisonment, and assault. The prosecution had a very strong case. The Snapchat videos were powerful evidence. You could see and hear Kelsey's fear. You could see she was being held against her will. There was no way to argue this was consensual. Darius's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy on him. This was a violent predator who'd lured a young woman using a fake identity with the intent to rape her. The case went to trial in November 2019. The prosecution presented the Snapchat videos to the jury. They called Kelsey to testify. Kelsey described the entire ordeal, from getting in Darius's car to being tied up in his basement. She talked about the fear she'd felt, thinking she was going to die. She explained how she'd managed to quickly record those videos and post them before Darius took her phone. The defense tried to discredit her, suggesting she'd gone to Darius's house willingly and only claimed kidnapping after regretting her decision. But the videos were undeniable proof. The jury wasn't swayed by the defense's arguments. On November 18th, 2019, the jury found Darius Matthews guilty on all counts. At sentencing in January 2020, he received 20 years in prison for the kidnapping charge, plus additional time for the other charges, totaling 25 years. He won't be eligible for parole until 2039 at the earliest. He'll be 52 years old by then. Kelsey credited Snapchat with saving her life. If she hadn't been able to post those videos, if her friends hadn't seen them and called police immediately, she believes Darius would have raped and possibly killed her. The quick thinking to record and post despite being terrified, and the quick response from her friends and law enforcement, that combination saved her. Let's move on to our third story now. This one takes us to Utica, New York in July 2019, and involves a murder that was broadcast across social media platforms. The victim was 21-year-old Bianca Michelle Devins, who went by the online name Oxychan. Bianca lived with her mother Kim and her sister Olivia in Utica. She'd graduated from Thomas R. Proctor High School in 2017 and had been working various jobs while figuring out what she wanted to do with her life. Bianca was very active in online communities. She had a significant presence on Instagram, where she had over 100,000 followers. She was also active on Discord, Snapchat, and other platforms. Bianca was known in the online community for being creative, kind, and supportive. She'd post photos of herself, often featuring her bright smile and colorful hair. She was into gaming, anime, and internet culture. She'd found a community online of people with similar interests. Through these online communities, Bianca had met a guy named Brandon Andrew Clark in early 2019. Brandon was also 21 and lived in Bridgewater, New York, about 20 miles from Utica. They'd connected through mutual friends on Discord and had started talking. Brandon developed romantic feelings for Bianca pretty quickly. He thought they were dating, but Bianca saw him more as a friend. She wasn't interested in a romantic relationship with Brandon, and she'd told him this multiple times. But Brandon didn't seem to accept it. He kept pushing for more. Brandon was possessive and jealous. Whenever Bianca would post photos on Instagram or talk to other guys online, Brandon would get upset. He'd send her long messages about how she should be with him, how they belonged together. Bianca would tell him to back off, that they were just friends. This pattern continued for months. Bianca's real-life friends told her Brandon was acting like a stalker, that she should cut him off completely. But Bianca felt bad for him. She knew Brandon had mental health issues, and she didn't want to hurt him by completely cutting him out of her life. On Saturday, July 13th, 2019, Bianca and Brandon both attended a concert in Queens, New York City. The concert was for a rapper named Lil Peep's memorial show. Bianca had bought tickets months earlier and Brandon had somehow gotten a ticket too. Bianca wasn't thrilled that Brandon would be there, but she decided to just enjoy the concert and ignore him if he got weird. At the concert, Bianca took lots of photos and videos. She posted them to her Instagram story throughout the night. In some of the videos, you can see her smiling, dancing, having fun with friends. After the concert ended around 11 p.m., Bianca needed a ride back to Utica. She'd gotten a ride down to the city with friends, but they were staying in the city overnight. Brandon offered to drive her home. Bianca was hesitant, but it was late and she was tired. She agreed. They left Queens around midnight and started the drive back to Utica, which was about a 4-hour drive. During the drive, Brandon was acting strange. He was quiet, brooding. When Bianca tried to make conversation, Brandon would give short, angry responses. Bianca started to feel uncomfortable. She texted her friend Chels around 1 a.m., saying, "Brandon's being weird. I shouldn't have gotten in the car with him." Chels texted back, "Do you want me to call you? Give you an excuse to have him drop you somewhere?" Bianca responded, "No, it's fine. We're already on the highway. I'll be home soon." But Brandon didn't take Bianca home. As they got closer to Utica, around 3 a.m., Brandon exited the highway and drove to a dead-end road in the town of Oneida, about 40 minutes from Utica. It was a secluded area, no houses nearby, just trees and darkness. Brandon stopped the car and turned off the engine. "Why are we stopping here?" Bianca asked, now genuinely scared. Brandon didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead. "Brandon, take me home right now," Bianca said firmly. Brandon turned to look at her, and Bianca saw something terrifying in his eyes. Pure rage. Brandon suddenly lunged at Bianca. She tried to fight him off, but he was stronger. He pulled out a knife that he'd hidden in his jacket. Bianca screamed and tried to get out of the car, but Brandon grabbed her. He started stabbing her. Bianca fought back desperately, scratching at Brandon's face and arms, trying to get the knife away. But Brandon was in a frenzy. He stabbed her repeatedly in the neck and throat. Bianca's screams turned to gurgling sounds as blood filled her throat. Within minutes, Bianca was dead, slumped in the passenger seat, covered in blood. Brandon sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, looking at what he'd done. Then he pulled out his phone. He took photos of Bianca's body. Close-up photos of her face, her wounds, the blood. Dozens of photos from different angles. Then Brandon opened Discord on his phone. He went to several servers where he and Bianca had both been active. He posted the photos with captions like, "I'm sorry, Bianca," and "I couldn't have you, so nobody can." People in the Discord servers started seeing the posts. At first, many thought it was fake, some kind of sick joke or edgy art. But as more photos appeared and as people recognized Bianca's distinct features, panic set in. Brandon also posted photos to his Instagram story, then to Bianca's Instagram story, because he knew her phone password and had access to her account. He was broadcasting Bianca's murder to thousands of people across multiple platforms. People started frantically trying to call Bianca. Her phone was ringing in the car, but of course she couldn't answer. People started calling 911 to report what they were seeing. Within about an hour of Brandon posting the first photos, around 4 a.m., police in Oneida received multiple 911 calls about possible violent content being shared online. The calls described photos of a young woman who appeared to be dead. Callers were able to provide screenshots and links. Police started investigating. Meanwhile, more posts kept appearing. Brandon was continuing to take photos and post them across different platforms, seemingly trying to make sure as many people as possible saw what he'd done. Around 6 a.m., as the sun was starting to come up, a passerby spotted Brandon's car on the dead-end road. The passerby noticed what looked like blood on the outside of the car. They called 911. Police were dispatched to the location. When officers arrived, they found Brandon standing next to his car. His clothes were covered in blood. Officers approached with weapons drawn. "Get on the ground now," they shouted. Brandon looked at them, and then, before they could reach him, he took the knife and cut his own throat. He collapsed to the ground. Officers rushed to Brandon and saw he'd cut himself deeply, but he was still alive. They also looked in the car and saw Bianca's body. One officer called for multiple ambulances immediately. Brandon was loaded into one ambulance and rushed to Upstate University Hospital in Syracuse. Bianca was pronounced dead at the scene. She was only 21 years old. The crime scene was horrific. There was blood everywhere inside the car. The medical examiner would later determine that Bianca had been stabbed more than 20 times, with most of the wounds concentrated on her neck and throat. She'd fought back hard. There was defensive wounds on her hands where she'd tried to grab the knife. Brandon's face and arms had scratches from where Bianca had clawed at him trying to get away. Brandon survived his suicide attempt. The cut to his throat was serious, but not fatal. He was treated at the hospital and stabilized. Once he was medically cleared, he was placed under arrest and charged with second-degree murder. He'd killed Bianca Michelle Devins in what police described as a jealous rage because she wouldn't be his girlfriend. The photos Brandon had posted of Bianca's body spread across the internet rapidly. Despite the platform's attempts to remove them, people kept screenshotting and resharing. Bianca's family was subjected to the horror of seeing their daughter's death photos circulating online. People were sending the photos directly to Bianca's mother and sister, either accidentally or in some cases deliberately to be cruel. It was a nightmare on top of a nightmare. Bianca's mother, Kim, became an advocate for getting the photos removed from the internet. She begged people to stop sharing them, to report them when they saw them. She worked with social media platforms to try to prevent the images from being reshared. But the internet is difficult to control. The photos kept resurfacing for months, and even years after Bianca's death. Brandon Clark's trial was delayed multiple times. He initially pleaded not guilty. His lawyers tried to argue that he had mental health issues, that he hadn't been in his right mind. But in July 2020, on the one-year anniversary of Bianca's murder, Brandon changed his plea to guilty. He admitted in court that he'd killed Bianca because he was jealous and angry that she didn't want to be with him romantically. He said he'd planned to kill himself after killing her, but had failed. At his sentencing hearing in March 20, Brandon was given an opportunity to make a statement. He said, "I'm sorry for the pain I've caused." But many people, including Bianca's family, felt his apology was hollow and self-serving. Bianca's mother, Kim, gave a victim impact statement where she described the agony of losing her daughter and the ongoing trauma of seeing Bianca's death photos spread across the internet. The judge sentenced Brandon Andrew Clark to 25 years to life in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 2044 when he's 46 years old. Whether he'll actually be granted parole remains to be seen. Bianca's family has vowed to fight against his release when the time comes. Now, let's continue with our fourth story. On January 3rd, 2017, in Chicago, Illinois, an 18-year-old man with special needs was kidnapped and tortured by 4 people he thought were his friends. The victim's name was never publicly released to protect his privacy. He attended a school for students with developmental disabilities and lived with his parents in the Chicago suburbs. One of the perpetrators, 24-year-old Jordan Hill, had been friends with the victim for several years. They'd gone to the same school together. Jordan would occasionally hang out with the victim, playing video games, watching movies, normal friend stuff. The victim's parents knew Jordan and felt comfortable with their son spending time with him. They trusted Jordan. On the afternoon of January 3rd, 2017, Jordan contacted the victim and asked if he wanted to hang out. The victim was excited. He didn't have a lot of friends, and he enjoyed spending time with Jordan. The victim's parents drove him to meet Jordan at a McDonald's in a suburb called Streamwood. They watched their son get into Jordan's van and drive away. They expected him home later that evening, but Jordan didn't take the victim to hang out. Instead, Jordan drove him to an apartment on the west side of Chicago, about 35 miles away. At the apartment were 3 other people: 18-year-old Brittany Covington, 24-year-old Tanisha Covington, who was Brittany's sister, and 18-year-old Tess Faye Cooper, who was friends with the Covingtons. These 3 people had met Jordan before, but didn't really know the victim. When the victim arrived at the apartment, the atmosphere changed immediately. The 4 perpetrators became hostile. They started making fun of the victim, pushing him around. The victim was confused and scared. He thought Jordan was his friend. Why was Jordan being mean to him? Why were these other people being so aggressive? The victim tried to leave, but Jordan blocked the door. What happened next was absolutely brutal. The 4 perpetrators tied up the victim using cables and cloth strips. They gagged him with a cloth to muffle his screams. Then they started beating him, punching him, kicking him, hitting him with closed fists. The victim was crying and trying to ask them to stop, but they just laughed. Brittany Covington cut part of his scalp with a knife, leaving a wound that would require stitches. They forced him to drink toilet water. They kicked him repeatedly. The violence went on for hours. Throughout this torture, the perpetrators were yelling at the victim. They were saying, "Fuck white people," and "Fuck Donald Trump," over and over. The victim was white and his attackers were black. This was clearly a racially motivated hate crime. They were also mocking him for having special needs, calling him retard and other slurs. They forced the victim to repeat what they were saying. "Say fuck white people," they demanded. "Say fuck Donald Trump." The victim, terrified and in pain, repeated what they told him to say. The most disturbing aspect of this case is that the perpetrators recorded much of the torture on their phones. Brittany Covington used her Facebook account to live stream parts of the attack on Facebook Live. The video showed the victim tied up, gagged, with blood on his face and clothes. The attackers could be heard laughing in the background, making comments about what they were doing. The live stream lasted for about 30 minutes before Brittany ended it. But the video had already been viewed by numerous people who were watching in real time. Some viewers of the Facebook live stream recognized that what they were watching was a real crime happening in real time. They tried to call police, but didn't have specific information about where the attack was taking place. The Facebook video didn't show an address or identifiable landmarks. Police were made aware that something was happening, but couldn't immediately locate the victims or perpetrators. In addition to the Facebook live stream, the perpetrators also shared videos through Snapchat. Jordan Hill sent videos to his Snapchat contacts showing the victim being beaten and humiliated. Some recipients were horrified and reported what they saw. Others watched but did nothing. The torture continued through the night of January 3rd and into the early morning of January 4th. At some point, the perpetrators became concerned that they were in trouble. The victim had been reported missing by his parents. Police were looking for him. The perpetrators decided they needed to get rid of the victim, but they couldn't just kill him in the apartment because that would leave evidence. They decided to take him somewhere and abandon him. On the afternoon of January 4th, the perpetrators unbound the victim and forced him to walk with them down the street. They walked him to a nearby strip mall parking lot. Some of the perpetrators were acting like everything was normal, like they were just walking with a friend, trying not to draw attention. But the victim had visible injuries. His clothes were torn and bloody. He was limping. A neighbor saw this group and immediately thought something was wrong. The neighbor called 911. Chicago police officers responded within minutes. When officers arrived at the scene, they saw the victim standing with the 4 perpetrators. Officers approached to investigate. The 4 perpetrators immediately tried to run in different directions. Jordan Hill was caught within a block. Brittany Covington was caught hiding behind a dumpster. Tanisha Covington and Tesfaye Cooper were found trying to hide in a nearby store. All four were arrested. The victim was taken to a hospital for treatment. He had multiple injuries, including the scalp wound that was still bleeding, bruises all over his body, and signs of dehydration. Doctors determined he'd been tortured for approximately 24 to 36 hours. Medical staff also performed a psychological evaluation and determined the victim was severely traumatized by what he'd been through. Detectives interviewed the victim, but he had difficulty clearly articulating what happened because of his developmental disabilities and the trauma. But police had other evidence. They had the Facebook Live video that Brittany had streamed. They had the Snapchat videos that Jordan had sent to his contacts. They had the physical evidence of the victim's injuries. They had witness statements from people who'd seen the Facebook live stream. The evidence was overwhelming. All four perpetrators were charged with hate crimes, aggravated kidnapping, aggravated unlawful restraint, and aggravated battery. Because the victim had disabilities and the crime was racially motivated, additional hate crime enhancements were applied. During their initial court appearances, all four defendants tried to claim they hadn't done anything wrong, that it was just friends hanging out and things got out of hand. But prosecutors weren't buying it. The videos showed clear intent to cause harm. The racial slurs and political statements showed bias motivation. This wasn't friends playing around. This was targeted violence. The case went to trial in 2019, more than 2 years after the attack. All four defendants eventually accepted plea deals rather than risk going to trial with such damning video evidence. Jordan Hill pleaded guilty to aggravated kidnapping and hate crimes. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Tesfaye Cooper pleaded guilty to a hate crime and aggravated kidnapping. He was sentenced to 7 years. Brittany Covington pleaded guilty to a hate crime and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Tanisha Covington pleaded guilty to a hate crime and received 3 years probation, avoiding prison time entirely. Many people felt these sentences were too light, given the severity of the crime. The victim had been tortured for over a day. He'd been permanently traumatized, and the perpetrators were getting less than a decade in prison, with one avoiding prison altogether. But prosecutors explained that plea deals often result in lighter sentences than trial convictions, and they'd made the decision that securing guaranteed convictions through pleas was better than risking acquittal at trial. The victim has continued to struggle with the aftermath of the attack. He's received ongoing therapy, but his parents say he's not the same person he was before. He's more anxious, less trusting, has nightmares about what happened. He can no longer see Jordan Hill as a friend who betrayed him. The complexity of that betrayal, the fact that someone he trusted hurt him so badly, it's something he may never fully process or recover from. Let's move to our fifth story now. This takes us to Anchorage, Alaska, in June 2019, and involves a murder plot that was coordinated through Snapchat. The victim was 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman. Cynthia had developmental disabilities that affected her cognitive abilities and social understanding. Despite this, Cynthia was trying to live as independently as possible. She had a job, she had friends, and she had a best friend named Denali Bramer, who she trusted completely. Denali Bremer was 18 years old and had been friends with Cynthia for several years. They'd met through a social program for young adults with special needs. Cynthia looked up to Denali and considered her the closest friend she had. Denali knew that Cynthia trusted her completely and would do anything for her. And Denali was about to exploit that trust in the worst possible way. In early May 2019, Denali started communicating with someone online who claimed to be a millionaire living in Kansas. This person went by the name Tyler and communicated with Denali through Snapchat and later through text messages. Tyler told Denali he was part of a secret club for wealthy people who liked to arrange crimes. He said he would pay millions of dollars to people who would kill someone and send him photo and video proof. This sounds absurd, like something from a movie, but Denali believed it or wanted to believe it. Tyler specifically told Denali he would pay her $9 million if she killed someone and documented it. $9 million. For an 18-year-old girl from Alaska who didn't have much money and was trying to figure out her future, this was an unimaginable amount. Denali started seriously considering it. She started thinking about who she could kill, and she settled on Cynthia. Cynthia trusted her completely. Cynthia wouldn't see it coming. It would be easy. Denali recruited several other people to help her. She told them about Tyler's offer and promised they'd split the money. The group included several teenage boys: Caden McIntosh, who was 16, Caleb Leyland, who was 19, and 2 others whose names were withheld because they were minors. These boys were friends of Denali's from school and the neighborhood. When Denali told them about the plan, some were skeptical, but Denali showed them the messages from Tyler. She showed them Tyler's promises of $9 million. Some of the boys got on board. They wanted their share of the money. The group started planning Cynthia's murder through Snapchat messages. They discussed when they would do it, where they would do it, how they would kill her. They talked about different methods. Shooting was decided on as the quickest and easiest. Caden McIntosh said he could get a gun. They discussed where to get rid of the body. They settled on Thunderbird Falls, a popular hiking area with trails leading to remote wooded areas and a river. They could lure Cynthia there, kill her, and dump her body in the river or bury it in the woods. On Sunday, June 2nd, 2019, Denali called Cynthia and asked if she wanted to go on a hike. Cynthia was excited. She loved spending time with Denali, and she enjoyed hiking. Denali picked Cynthia up and they drove to Thunderbird Falls. The other participants in the murder plot were already there or arrived separately, so Cynthia wouldn't suspect anything. When Cynthia and Denali started hiking, the others joined them on the trail, making it seem like a coincidental meeting. The group hiked for about 30 minutes, heading away from the main trail and into a more secluded area. Cynthia was chatting happily, not suspecting anything was wrong. When they were far enough from other hikers that they wouldn't be seen or heard, Denali gave a signal. Caden McIntosh pulled out a pistol he'd been hiding in his jacket. Cynthia saw the gun and started to realize something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, looking at Denali confused. Before she could say anything else, Caden aimed the gun at the back of Cynthia's head and pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the woods. Cynthia dropped to the ground instantly. She was dead before she hit the dirt. Her best friend had just orchestrated her murder. The group stood there for a moment, processing what they'd just done. Then Denali took out her phone. She took photos of Cynthia's body, close-ups of her face, of the gunshot wound, of the blood, multiple photos from different angles. She also took short videos. All of this was to send to Tyler as proof, so he would send the money. Then the group had to dispose of the body. They dragged Cynthia's body down an embankment toward the Eklutna River. It was steep and difficult. Cynthia's body was heavy and the ground was muddy, but they managed to push her body down toward the river. They tried to cover her with branches and debris, thinking it would hide the body long enough that any evidence would be washed away or decomposed. Then the group left the area, trying to act normal. Denali sent the photos and videos to Tyler through Snapchat. She waited for his response. Tyler responded saying, "Good job, I'll send the money soon." Denali was excited. She told the others that Tyler was processing the payment. They just had to wait. But hours passed and no money came. Denali messaged Tyler asking when the payment would arrive. Tyler made excuses. "Bank transfer takes time. I need to verify some things. Be patient." Days passed, no money. Denali messaged Tyler repeatedly. His responses became less frequent and more vague. By the end of the week, Denali was starting to realize she'd been scammed. There was no $9 million. Tyler, whoever he really was, had manipulated her into committing murder for nothing. Denali had killed her best friend for a payment that never existed and was never going to exist. Meanwhile, Cynthia's family had reported her missing. Her mother called police on the evening of June 2nd, when Cynthia didn't come home. Officers took the report and started investigating. They learned from Cynthia's phone records that she'd last talked to Denali Bremer. When questioned, Denali claimed she'd taken Cynthia hiking, but that Cynthia had wandered off the trail and they couldn't find her. Denali said they'd searched for a while, but eventually had to leave. She claimed she'd planned to report Cynthia missing, but hadn't gotten around to it yet. Detectives were suspicious of Denali's story. It didn't add up. Why wouldn't you immediately report your friend missing if she wandered off in the woods? Police obtained search warrants for the phones and social media accounts of Denali and the other people who'd been on the hike. What they found was shocking. There were Snapchat messages between Denali and the others planning Cynthia's murder. There were messages between Denali and Tyler discussing the payment. There were the photos and videos Denali had taken of Cynthia's body and sent to Tyler. All of the participants were arrested within 48 hours of Cynthia's disappearance. When confronted with the evidence, Denali confessed to everything. She told detectives about Tyler, about the $9 million offer, about planning the murder, about Caden shooting Cynthia. She led police to the area where they dumped Cynthia's body. Search and rescue teams found Cynthia's remains near the Eklutna River, partially submerged and decomposed but identifiable. Denali Bremer was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. Caden McIntosh, who'd pulled the trigger, was charged as an adult with first-degree murder, even though he was only 16. The others were charged with various degrees of conspiracy and accessory to murder. All of the defendants, except one, agreed to plea deals. Denali pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison with no possibility of parole. Caden McIntosh also pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received a similar lengthy sentence. The others received sentences ranging from 20 to 40 years, depending on their level of involvement. Police tried to track down Tyler, but were unable to identify him. The Snapchat account had been created with fake information and accessed through VPNs that masked the user's location. The phone number associated with it was a VoIP number that couldn't be traced to a specific person. To this day, Tyler's real identity remains unknown. It's possible Tyler was someone in another country, just manipulating people for entertainment. It's possible Tyler was someone else entirely. The only certainty is that someone convinced Denali to commit murder and then disappeared without a trace. Cynthia Hoffman's family was devastated. Cynthia had been a sweet girl who'd trusted her best friend completely, and Denali had betrayed that trust in the most horrific way possible. Cynthia's mother said in interviews that she'd welcomed Denali into their home, had trusted her with her daughter, and had believed Denali was a good friend. The realization that Denali had planned and executed Cynthia's murder was almost incomprehensible. Now, let's move to our sixth and final story. This takes us to suburban Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in early 2020, and involves a case of stalking facilitated through Snapchat's location features. The victim was Ashley Wilson, a 24-year-old elementary school teacher. Ashley lived alone in a small apartment in a complex in the Broomall area. She was single, enjoyed her job teaching second grade, and was active on social media, including Snapchat. Ashley used Snapchat primarily to stay in touch with friends and family. She would share photos of her classroom, pictures of things she did on weekends, normal everyday stuff. Ashley had the Snap Map feature enabled, which allows Snapchat users to see their friends' locations in real time. Ashley had her settings configured so that her close friends could see her location. She thought this was convenient and safe. If she was meeting up with friends, they could see where she was. If she was somewhere and needed help, her friends would know where to find her. She didn't see any downside to this feature. In February 2020, Ashley started noticing some strange things happening. First, someone created a fake Snapchat account using a username very similar to Ashley's. The fake account used a slightly different spelling, but was clearly trying to impersonate her. The fake account started adding Ashley's friends. Some of her friends accepted the friend request, thinking it was just Ashley's second account. The fake account started posting photos of Ashley that she hadn't posted publicly. These were photos that seemed to have been taken from a distance, like someone was photographing her without her knowledge. Photos of her walking to her car in the morning, photos of her at the grocery store, photos of her at a restaurant with friends. Ashley found out about the fake account when one of her friends texted her, asking, "Why did you make a second Snapchat?" Ashley was confused. "I didn't make a second account," she replied. Her friend sent her screenshots of the fake account. Ashley was disturbed. Someone was impersonating her and posting creepy photos. She reported the account to Snapchat, and it was taken down within 24 hours. Ashley thought that was the end of it. But a few days later, another fake account appeared. Same pattern, similar username, photos of Ashley taken from a distance, adding her friends. Ashley reported this one too, and it was taken down. Then a third fake account appeared. Ashley was now seriously concerned. Someone was repeatedly creating fake accounts focused on her. This wasn't random. Someone was targeting her specifically. Ashley also started receiving weird messages on Snapchat from accounts she didn't recognize. The accounts had generic usernames and no profile pictures. The messages said things like, "I'm always watching you," and "You look really pretty today." "I saw you at Target," and "I know where you live." The messages were creepy and threatening. Ashley blocked each account as they appeared, but new ones kept popping up. She felt like she was being stalked. Then things escalated offline. Ashley started finding notes on her car. She'd come out of her apartment in the morning to go to work, and there'd be a piece of paper tucked under her windshield wiper. The notes were handwritten and said disturbing things. "I've been watching you for a long time. You're so beautiful when you don't know anyone's looking. I know your schedule. Soon we'll be together." The notes were unsigned. Ashley took photos of them and reported them to the police in Marple Township, where she lived. Police took a report and said they'd increase patrols in her area. They collected the notes as evidence, but told Ashley that without knowing who was leaving them, there wasn't much they could do beyond patrol more frequently. They suggested Ashley install security cameras at her apartment to potentially catch the person. Ashley immediately went to a hardware store and bought a doorbell camera and 2 other cameras to set up around her apartment. She installed them that same day. Over the next few weeks, Ashley was constantly on edge. She was checking over her shoulder constantly. She was scared to be alone in her apartment. She would check the cameras obsessively, watching for any signs of someone lurking around. She started parking in different spots each day, hoping to throw off whoever was watching her. She changed her routine, going to different grocery stores and restaurants. She was trying everything to shake this stalker. On March 15th, 2020, Ashley was getting ready to leave for work around 7 a.m. She looked out her window before going to her car, a habit she'd developed. She saw a car parked across the street that she didn't recognize. It was a dark-colored sedan, and there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. The person was holding up their phone toward her apartment building. Ashley's heart started racing. She watched for a few minutes, and the person didn't move, just kept holding the phone up like they were filming or photographing her building. Ashley decided to just get to her car quickly and drive away. She grabbed her things and hurried out of her apartment. She walked quickly to her car, watching the sedan out of the corner of her eye. As soon as Ashley got in her car and started the engine, the sedan's engine started too. Ashley pulled out of her parking spot, and the sedan pulled out and started following her. Ashley was terrified. This was it. The stalker was following her. Ashley didn't drive to work. Instead, she drove straight to the Marple Township Police Department, which was only about 3 minutes away. She kept checking her rearview mirror, and the sedan was staying right behind her, not even trying to be subtle anymore. As Ashley turned into the police station parking lot, the sedan suddenly peeled off and drove away quickly. Ashley didn't get a great look at the driver, but she saw it was a white male with a shaved head. Ashley ran into the police station and told the officers on duty what had just happened. She gave them the description of the sedan and the license plate number, which she'd managed to memorize. Officers immediately ran the plate. It came back registered to a 32-year-old man named Derek Foster, who lived in Havertown, about 10 miles from Ashley's apartment. Officers pulled up Derek's information and saw he had no prior criminal record, but that didn't mean much. Police decided to send officers to Derek's address to question him. 2 detectives went to Derek Foster's house. They knocked on the door, and Derek answered. He looked nervous immediately when he saw it was police. The detectives identified themselves and asked Derek if they could ask him some questions. Derek said yes and stepped outside. The detectives asked Derek if he'd been in Broomall that morning near Ashley Wilson's apartment. Derek said no, he'd been home all morning. The detectives said that was interesting because his car had been seen there and had followed a woman to the police station. Derek started sweating and stammering. He changed his story and said okay. He'd been in the area, but he wasn't following anyone. The detectives asked Derek if he knew Ashley Wilson. Derek hesitated and then said no. The detectives told Derek they had reason to believe he'd been stalking Ashley. Derek denied it emphatically. He said he didn't know who Ashley was, that this was all a misunderstanding. The detectives asked if Derek would consent to a search of his home and electronic devices. Derek refused and said he wanted a lawyer. That ended the conversation. But the detectives had enough for a search warrant. They applied for one that same day, citing the stalking reports, the notes, the fake social media accounts, and Derek following Ashley that morning. A judge approved the warrant. The next day, March 16th, 2020, police executed the search warrant at Derek Foster's house. What they found was beyond disturbing. In Derek's bedroom, on his personal computer, there was a folder labeled with Ashley's name. Inside were hundreds of photos of Ashley. Most were screenshots from her public social media accounts, but many were photos taken of her in person from a distance. Photos of Ashley leaving her apartment, walking to her car, at the grocery store, at restaurants, at various locations around town. The metadata on these photos showed they'd been taken over a period of about 4 months, since November 2019. There were also screenshots of Ashley's Snapchat location from SnapMap. Dozens of screenshots showing Ashley's Bitmoji icon at different locations. Her apartment, the school where she worked, a yoga studio she went to, various shops and restaurants. Derek had been using her SnapMap location to track her movements in real time. Whenever Ashley's location updated on SnapMap, Derek would take a screenshot and save it. He had a log going back months. Police also found documents on Derek's computer. One was titled Ashley's Schedule and listed her work schedule, when she usually left for work, when she came home, where she went on weekends, what times she went to the gym. Derek had been meticulously documenting Ashley's routine. Another document was more disturbing. It was titled The Plan, and it detailed how Derek intended to kidnap Ashley. He'd written out a step-by-step plan. Wait for a day when Ashley was home alone. Break into her apartment late at night when she'd be asleep. Use zip ties to bind her hands and feet. Put tape over her mouth. Carry her to his car. Take her to a location he'd scouted, an abandoned cabin in the Poconos. Keep her there until she agreed to be with him. It was a detailed kidnapping plan. Police found physical evidence too. In Derek's closet, they found zip ties, duct tape, rope, chloroform, and a black bag with gloves. These were kidnapping supplies. Derek had been preparing to act on his plan. In his car, they found a baseball cap and sunglasses, likely a disguise. They found a notebook with Ashley's license plate number written in it multiple times, along with notes about where her car was usually parked. Derek Foster was arrested and charged with stalking, harassment, attempted kidnapping, and several other crimes. During questioning after his arrest, Derek refused to talk without his lawyer present. His lawyer advised him not to make any statements, but the evidence spoke for itself. Derek had been stalking Ashley for months, tracking her through her Snap Map location, photographing her without her knowledge, planning to kidnap her. The case was airtight. The investigation revealed that Derek had become obsessed with Ashley after seeing her at a Starbucks in November 2019. He'd been at the same Starbucks, saw Ashley, and for whatever reason became fixated on her. He'd followed her to her car that day and gotten her license plate number. He used connections. He worked at a car dealership and had access to vehicle registration databases to find her name and address from the license plate. Once he had her name, he found all her social media accounts. He found her Snapchat and added her using a fake account, which Ashley had accepted thinking it was someone she knew. Once Derek was on Ashley's Snapchat friends list, he could see her location through Snap Map because Ashley had her privacy settings configured to show her location to friends. Derek didn't even need to interact with Ashley or send her messages. He just watched her location silently. He'd check Snap Map multiple times a day to see where Ashley was. If she was somewhere interesting, he'd drive there and photograph her from a distance. He'd been doing this for 4 months before Ashley even noticed the fake accounts and strange messages. Derek Foster's trial took place in late 2020. The prosecution presented all the evidence found on his computer and in his house. They presented testimony from Ashley describing the fear and distress she'd experienced. They presented the notes Derek had left on her car, the photos he'd taken, the kidnapping plan he'd written. The defense tried to argue that Derek hadn't actually done anything yet, that planning a crime isn't the same as committing one, that Derek had mental health issues and needed treatment, not prison. But the jury wasn't persuaded. On November 18, 2020, Derek Foster was convicted on all counts, including stalking, criminal harassment, and attempted kidnapping. At his sentencing in January 2021, the judge noted the premeditated and calculated nature of Derek's stalking. The judge said Derek had used technology to track Ashley's every move, had spent months preparing to kidnap her, and would have absolutely carried out his plan if Ashley hadn't spotted him and driven to the police station that morning. The judge sentenced Derek to 15 years in state prison. Ashley has since deleted all her social media accounts, including Snapchat. She moved to a different apartment in a different town. She changed jobs to a school in a different district. She took self-defense classes and got a concealed carry permit. She's trying to rebuild her sense of safety, but it's difficult. The knowledge that someone had been watching her for months, tracking her through an app she used innocently, planning to kidnap her, it's traumatic in a way that's hard to fully recover from. These 6 stories show the dark side of Snapchat and social media. Madison Hacheney was lured by a predator using a fake identity. Kelsey Morrison was kidnapped, but saved her own life by posting videos. Bianca Devins was murdered and her killer broadcasted it. A special needs victim was tortured on camera. Cynthia Hoffman was killed for money that didn't exist, planned through messages. Ashley Wilson was stalked using Snap Map's location feature. All 6 cases show how technology can be weaponized by people with bad intentions. Thank you for watching this comprehensive look at these Snapchat crimes. If you found this content valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. Share this with others who might find these stories important. Thanks for watching.